You are now in the Backcourt, a Brooklyn Nets podcast presented by Ticketmaster and hosted by the two of us. One of us being Lucas Kaplan, that is me, writer for NetsDaily, Nets Film Focus, all that good stuff. And joining me as always is Sarah Kustok. How we doing?
We're good. Coming off of a Brooklyn Nets win, and in this final stretch, so we're doing well. How about you?
I'm well, coming off of a very fun win that, kind of is one of those end of season wins where you just can't believe how quickly the time passed. And, we say this every season, obviously, but, you see some of the vets cheering for some of the young guys, some of the guys that were on two-way contracts are on two-way contracts, and somewhat of a full circle moment that reminds you how long an NBA season is, and yet how quickly it seems to fly by. Plus, it's 50 degrees and sunny outside, so that's always nice.
It is. I would take 60 degrees and sunny, but you know what? We can't be too choosy right now.
We can't complain, it's the Northeast. It was 75 last week, and then 45, and then 70. So as long as the sun is out, that's good. And the Nets, can you believe the Nets? This is episode 24, and the Nets just have 3 games left after this one. Uh, as this season felt abnormally fast, abnormally slow, anything to you or regular?
I don't know if abnormal is the right word, but and you alluded to it. It's amazing how fast it feels like it's flown by. I can't believe we're already sitting here talking about the Nets having just 3 games remaining. However, the thought of what the group looked like at training camp,
Yeah.
thinking about the iterations of the group early on, the impact of Dennis Schroeder, Dorian Finney-Smith, the list goes on. Some of those really great stretches around Thanksgiving, that win at Phoenix. There's so many parts of the season that, in the same vein, feel like 2 or 3 seasons ago, and I think that's
Mm-hmm.
because of the evolution and the changes that occurred throughout the year. And I think, with that being said, though, it's always a bittersweet time for me because, for as much as I know we've been on the grind, and for all these players, coaching staff, had everyone involved, it takes a lot. 82 games is a lot of just time, sweat, work put into this, and so when it starts to come to a finality, and I think too, knowing that it's going to be the end. In so many other cases, when you have the postseason to look forward to, or what things might look like, there's still a little bit more runway and uncertainty, but I think overall, I think you've said it, I've said it. This has been a tremendous, tremendous group to work with, to cover, regardless of who it has been on the roster and what it's looked like. Such a really refreshing look at what this coaching staff is, led by Jordi Fernandez. And a lot of these core pieces of this group have just been truly a pleasure to be around and to watch how they show up every day.
That is something I did really want to talk about today because, and I want to get into favorite moments of the season, this and that, probably next week. But I'm glad you mentioned that early season West Coast trip. But just to your point, the starting lineup last night, we're recording this on Wednesday morning, so a Tuesday night win against the New Orleans Pelicans. Trendon Watford, Zaire Williams, Nick Claxton, Reece Beekman, Jalen Wilson. The starting lineup on opening night, close loss to the Hawks. Cam Johnson, Ben Simmons, Dorian Finney-Smith, Dennis Schroeder, Cam Thomas. So a completely different starting five. Jalen Wilson did come off the bench in that game, so did Zaire, but this team has been through many evolutions, and through it all, they've been really consistently fun to work with, fun to cover, as Sarah said. And so I think we should just start by talking about the game last night, which was really a perfect emblem in many ways of their season. Obviously, earlier in the week since we last recorded, they lost a tough game to the Wolves, a close game for a lot of it, and then a loss to the Raptors, which was not as close. So it was nice to see them get a win yesterday against the Pelicans. And it was with a lot of that, guys who entered camp as back end of the roster guys, deep bench guys, or guys that weren't even here. So what did you see from really a pretty thorough, almost wire-to-wire win for the Nets last night?
It was, and it got a little closer than I think you would anticipate
Yeah.
towards the end. So I think overall it was a really dominant performance in terms of just having a handle on what the Pelicans were trying to do, the way they were playing. I know it was a little back and forth early on. I think the fact that you have 7 players in double figures, Every guy that came off the bench and played was in double figures. Some of the big nights, you look at Reece Beekman, who had already been coming off of a really impressive game against Toronto. I know that was a tough game and a tough loss, but he had 14 points, 5 assists, 4 rebounds. He has 10 assists in this one. Despite the fact that he didn't score, he had his fingerprints on a lot of different areas of the game. Of course, Trendon Watford is a player we've talked about quite a bit and just seemingly did a little bit of everything leading the way. But I think the things that stuck out to me most about that win was one, and it certainly was not perfect, but the totality of it being a team win and the consistency of feeling like these guys continue to play in a way of which they are really unselfish and trying to find one another. 30 assists, and it's not like, I mean, they had 41 field goals. It's not like this was a 130-point game,
No.
but the shots they were creating, even the shots that weren't going in, I think about how many three-point shots,
Hmm.
especially early on, or there were stretches where
Yeah.
they went cold that were just really well created shots. And I know the Pelicans are not a poster child for a amazing defense, but I think at the end of the day that doesn't always matter. It's still a professional team that's got players that, have some pride. We're playing hard and trying to get stops. And I think just the way that the Nets went about it was a reflection of everything that they've done, the system that they run, especially when it was a lot of different players getting their first opportunity or some early opportunities or more run um, in these final stretches and playing, with different groups and different combinations. And I thought just overall getting to continue to watch that shows the continuity of just kind of the foundation that's been laid for this organization.
Yeah, 30 assists on 41 made field goals, and it would have been more if they didn't go to the line. They went to the line
Yeah,
24 times.
exactly.
So some of those nice passes led to, free throw attempts, which I'm sure, the Nets coaching staff and they all track. I'm glad you started with Reece Beekman. Boy, Reece just makes like two or three defensive plays a game. I know he had 10 assists last night, but he just makes like two or three defensive plays a game where I'm like, that
Yeah.
was really, he had a strip in
Yep.
transition last night.
Yes.
Like
Yeah.
he's really good when the Nets, double or hedge or they trap a ball screen and the ball handler tries to hit the guy who set the screen. Reece is always getting his hands on those passes. He's really got something on defense, I think. Like clearly already a plus defender in the NBA in his rookie year. I know he's an older rookie, but that's not easy to do. And 10 assists last night. He was a plus 14. He only turned it over once. Some of the catch and shoot three stuff, if that just keeps improving for him, like you can see how he's going to be a long-term player, and he just feels like a coach's dream. And it's not surprising to hear Jordy really talk about, sing his praises last night.
Absolutely.
Um, and Jordy also sung the praises of the veterans who, maybe didn't play their full normal minute total, like Zaire and Nick Claxton, 17 minutes apiece, Trendon Watford, 23 minutes, but what does it say about all those guys that they not only came in and really produced in those minutes, they all scored, Zaire 9, Nick's 13, Trendon 22, but Drew Timmy's mentioned Nick Claxton as a guy on the bench that consistently is in his ear. They talked about the joy Trendon, D'Angelo Russell, who didn't play last night, Zaire had for those younger guys. We talk a lot about culture and what this can mean long term, but when we're actually like in the moment and we're seeing the seeds, hopefully of something really special being planted, how do you think it translates long term? What gives you confidence when you
Right.
see stuff like that?
All of that. Like, that's what it makes me feel so good about what this season was and the players that are here, those that you mentioned, and then Nick Claxton, D'Angelo Russell, Cam Johnson, Cam Thomas when he's been on the but like there is a continuity of how a lot of those, and I guess more of the vets of a D'Lo and a CJ, how they're able to translate what they've been through, their experiences, and the enthusiasm they have for the guys playing on the floor. And that is always insane. Same goes with Nick with how he plays, but you feel that. You see that when they're making shots and every time they turn to look at the bench and the benches, getting excited for them, the mutual support that builds, and I think one builds for an organization because you could tell these guys care about one another, playing for one another, want to see the success of their teammates, but it also is how they're actually playing. And you see those side conversations. You see when timeouts are called and the coaches are huddled up at first, like the players interacting and what they're pointing out to one another. And that one is invaluable for an organization. But to me, you think about all the stories of, and there's so many that I talk to or that players, oh, when I was a rookie, this guy told me this,
Hmm.
or this, I watched how he showed up and worked. I watched the habits that he helped instill in me. Like, this is really important for so many of these players that, again, this is a unique circumstance that they're getting an opportunity to showcase their skill set in long run plays. And NBA is so much about fit, and it's so much about what a circumstance is year by year, and we know that changes so quickly.
Yeah.
Obviously, things in the league change so quickly, but you can work your way onto a team or get a role or get a niche and play in the league for the next 10 years, or there's certain things that if you don't take advantage of some of those small moments, small windows, whatever the fit may be, you could be out of the league. And I think for these players to continue to understand that, but really soak up what some of these guys who've established themselves have done despite challenges, despite changes. That to me is I always hope for those players that they really grab a hold of that. And I think collectively they have, and that's what builds a really good base for an organization.
Yeah, I think you can. I think we can, as pro basketball fans, as NBA fans, really underestimate or overestimate the margins of the league. Because all these guys are so good and they're playing against each other, and you think, oh, this starter is so much better than this, bench player on this other team, and so on and so forth. Like, oh, the 10th pick in this draft is so much better than the 25th pick, but when you see guys get run and when you see situations change, it really kind of elucidates just how thin the margins are when you're at the highest level and how much is situation dependent. Like, Tyrese Martin, for example, is 25, about to be 26 years old, long career at UConn, been around for a couple years now, G League, two-way contract with the Hawks. And he's just kind of looked like he's belonged all season, with
Yeah.
consistent run. And the coaching staff has told him to let it fly from three. So the 3-point volume's been up, but he's shooting really nicely at the rim. He's shown some really cool stuff getting there. And it's like, why wasn't this guy getting consistent run on an NBA team before? And the fact that the Nets have been able to play a few of those guys and make them look, like bona fide NBA players, I think is a really good sign for the player development staff and the coaching staff. And above all, it really just feels like they got the right group of guys and under the right leadership for this season. They're going to end with somewhere between 26 and 29 wins. And so you look at that, and it clearly doesn't tell the story of what this season is. And you look at this being the first year under Jordi Fernández, and they have a bunch of draft picks coming up, like we've talked about. And it's like, you do kind of hope, just generally, that the roster will look different in the coming years, just as a statement of fact. And yet, this roster that played in the 2024-25 season has just done everything right. They've done everything that's asked of them. They've made the 26, 27, however many wins and however many losses enjoyable and have played really hard. And I kind of wanted to give them their props because, you say they've been fun to be around, fun to cover. And I think Nets fans who have watched a lot of games will feel that through the TV screen. But, someone a bit closer to the team, what makes this team special in that regard to you?
To me, it's been their mentality of both professionalism in how they show up each and every day, but also the passion and the care factor for one another and wanting to prove whatever the notion of what they're supposed to be
Hmm.
wrong, and say, no, 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 we belong here, we deserve this. I think at some point, and I don't know if Jordi Fernandez said this, at a I can't remember the circumstance, but essentially the idea of, for a player that is getting an opportunity because someone else is injured or a trade was just made, or you as a player need to believe that you deserve to be on the floor. You shouldn't be putting on a jersey and stepping out there if that's not already your thought process. And I can feel that anytime someone steps on the floor, and credit again to one, the players and in the disposition character of all of these guys, but two, the coaching staff instills that belief in a way the guys really feel that. This team has felt this regardless through the year. We've seen that in so many different performances when there were so many heartbreakers of those 1 point losses or single
Yeah.
digit losses or nothing. Which those are tough, and again, I keep circling back to the vets that have been on this team, those that are still here, those are not. Um, all of it is just a credit to, like, truly their inner understanding of what it takes to be at this place and try and stay at this place, and how special this league is, and I think that to me is just there is a high level of respect for the game and respect for one another. And that feels like, yeah, of course, you're getting paid to do this. This is your job. Like, that's one we all know that goes out the window when you're in these moments and you're in the trenches and it's day after day after day for a very long stretch of time. And two, that's we have not I have not felt that always on everything a single season you're watching or teams that you're around or you
Yeah.
get a feel. Um, from others that you talk to, and that is as genuine as it comes. I think often people go, that are other teams or whomever that are not as like, oh man, this must have been a tough season. It's like actually this was. I feel for the losses and for these players for how much, but no, like for me, it was so much fun to call these games, to be around this group, to watch them, to watch their development, their growth, and you always want the best. You feel for them for injuries and for times that you can't. But overall, I look back and I'm like, I'm really impressed and I'm inspired by how this group has come together. Again, with a great level of consistency through the
It's
whole
very
year.
yeah, it's very easy to have developed an sort of emotional attachment to them, especially guys that, were not guaranteed NBA careers that may have solidified NBA careers this season, or at least maybe solidified rotation minutes in the future. And I don't want to say like they got the short end of the stick. They're in the NBA, they have a chance to play, but when you're on a team and a lot of people are just focused on the long term, they're focused beyond this
Yes.
year and the future assets and whatever, it can maybe, I'm not in the NBA, I don't know, but it would seem to me that it can take away from what you're doing on a night to night basis on the court.
100%.
And they never let that was never part of this group. So I really want to commend them for that. We can kind of end this section with this Jordy quote because I asked him last night, how does this season, how does it plant seeds for the future? How are we sure these close games, these fun games like we had last night against the Pels aren't just one offs? And he said, I'm very excited because this is continuity. This is what we want. We don't want to do something in one season and then start over because this is a good beginning. These guys are driving the culture and they're doing it on their own. So granting them ownership. Obviously, I would argue Jordy had something to do with that, but he's not one to take
No,
credit for
he's not.
himself.
No.
Um, so yeah, we actually now I want to talk about a guy. There is some injury news over the last week, and kind of wrap up his season as we've done with Cam Thomas, whose season ended due to injury. Noah Clowney suffered another ankle sprain, unfortunately, his fourth of the year, and with a week left in the season, I think everyone kind of came to an agreement. It makes sense to, if I don't know, shut him down is the right word, but Jordi Fernández announced he won't play again this season. And so Clowney's sophomore season does come to an end a bit prematurely. He played 46 games, started 20 of them, averaged 9, 4, and 1 in, not a ton of minutes. And Noah Clowney was, one of the probably the most intriguing young prospect. He was, he's 20 years old. He had just turned 20 when the season started. So what did you make of his season, big picture?
I thought there were so many positives and obviously reasons for optimism. What is he still 20? Is he
Yeah,
21 yet?
still 20.
Still 20 years old. So like I think you need to continue to remind yourself just the trajectory of what that can become for a player that is still trying to learn and is that young and how much he was able to soak up. I think you saw the improvements of him really becoming a stretch big and the not only willingness and confidence, but the added consistency of what he can do and knocking down 3-point shots. And we've always seen those defensive instincts, and ability to play the pick and roll, the slash ability, being a lob threat. So I think there's so much positive to take. One, I think Availability and being healthy. Like, sometimes there's random injuries that occur and, things that can hamper you that you can't control, and I think we saw a lot of that from him this year, but a big part is going to be what does that availability look like just in terms of being able to be there on the floor, and the consistency of that, and it was a tough season for him with that, but overall, I think you see the upside and you really latch onto the fact of he's just scratching the surface of, I think, areas that he can continue to improve upon and do so with his skill and with his size, frame, and a lot of the other talent that he has.
46 games in addition to 23 last year. He's played 1,400 minutes in the NBA. If you're playing 30 minutes a night, which he wasn't, that's like 47 games. So he got a lot of good, solid run in the G League last season that I watched a lot of. And, the end of his rookie season last year felt like a continuation of that. But overall, he really has not played a ton in the NBA. And I
Right.
do think it's worth noting, I would say his strongest stretch of the season happened before his first ankle sprain. And it felt like he never really regathered that rhythm. And maybe he would have if he didn't suffer 3 subsequent ankle sprains. He was shooting just a hair under 38% from 3. I know small sample size, but it went down to 33.3%. And that's pretty much what he's shooting in his pro career, from the G League, last NBA season, this NBA season. On a decent sample size, it's starting to collect. And that is a really strong development. You hear 33.3 and you think maybe not the best number, but he was an 18-year-old freshman in Alabama, shot 28%. He's shooting NBA threes. He's shooting a lot of them. The volume ends this year taking about 12 threes per 100 possession. That is high volume. And it does feel like the shooting talent outpaced the numbers this year. I don't know if you'd agree.
I do think that because I think a lot of it too is just the ability to figure out how, when, where your shots are coming from, especially for a player like that that is getting used to just the comfort and the rhythms of the NBA, who they're playing with. And with the changing lineups, changing rotation, the
Mm-hmm.
in and out nature for him, like, I think that matters. So absolutely. I do think that. And to me, just even watching him or why Jordy has always for most all players, but the green light, let it fly, all of those things. I do think there was stretches that there's a balance of okay, when's the best look for the shot for you? Yeah, yeah, we're a high volume 3-point shooting team, but there's still an ebb and flow to what that looks like within the context of the offense and with everyone. And I think that's still going to be a growth process for him, and it will help in those efficiency numbers.
Yeah, Noah, Jordy mentioned that. He mentioned, when we get a look at guys, we have this development plans for them. We need to see, it helps us to see them in different lineups, different actions. So we have to let them show us what they can do. We have to give them an opportunity to surprise us, to play outside the box. Tim Capstraw loves calling this out on the broadcast, but the Nets run what is called Bilbao action. He wanted me to say it with the accent. It's a town in Spain. For Noah Clowney, which is essentially a sort of screening action where he goes to set a screen and then twirls around it and pops out for 3. So the Nets were running plays for Noah to come off screens and shoot threes on the run this year. And I think that's indicative of how Noah and the team kind of views his long-term development.
Yes.
Like it's going to start from 3. And, I don't know if he's going to play a ton of center. I think like those questions are a bit too specific when you're thinking about long-term outlook. But I am just curious as to like what, the promise of Noah is, like how his offense is going to come beyond the 3-point shooting. It seems like he's going to have opportunities to pump fake and go. He's drawing closeouts, shooting a lot of threes will do that. And I've written on NetsDaily, like, especially in the G League last year, there was some stuff going to the rim off the bounce. He made some nice passes this year off the bounce. And so I'm excited to see him continue to just try stuff, put the ball on the deck. But I do think this is a solid building block. I do also want to say, a lot of people talked about his block numbers being down. He just blocked so many shots when he came up rookie year last year. I do like that he played in a very different defensive system this year, and I want to say that is probably a reason for some of those block numbers being down. The Nets went from 12th to 26th in blocks this year, just allowing less shots at the rim, pressuring the ball up top, flying around 4-on-3. It was a little bit less, shell defense, come over from the weak side, drop coverage, straight up switching, that sort of stuff. So, we'll see with Noah, but I'm really excited to just continue watch him trying stuff. And speaking of that, who was your favorite net to watch this past week in terms of trying stuff, showing what they have? Because pretty much all these nets, I would imagine, set highs in like minutes and shots over a week.
That's a great question. I don't know if I don't like to pick favorites, but what I did enjoy was watching Dariq Whitehead. Feel like he's a guy that similarly in the concept of being young, still being 20, what can his ceiling look like? Getting comfortable, getting a rhythm, getting healthy, all of those things. And he was a player that showcased his added comfort when he got more run, knocking down some 3-point looks. And I think too, you could see the love of his teammates and the enthusiasm they have when he's making shots, when he's playing well. And he's someone that, I've just been curious. What does it look like? Spent a ton of time with the Long Island Nets, has had some really nice moments with them, but how could it potentially translate? And I think we saw some of that, especially against the Pelicans, with the quickness of his shot and with himself making himself available to be open from three.
Hey, Dorita said, this is going to be the first summer that I can actually work out fully and not just have to rehab and just focus on getting stronger. He's only 20 years old, so I'm really excited for his summer. Jordi Fernandez dropped a fantastic sort of coming of age Troy Bolton style quote last night, calling this the most important summer of our lives, which felt accurate, but also very, most important summer of our lives. It stood out to
I
me.
feel like I feel like he's said that quite, and I think that that is because it's a concept of, and probably the next summer will be the
Yeah. Hey,
next most important, but it is like that for so many of these players. A lot of the decision making of what their NBA career will be or can be, or if it will be, may come down to the work that they put in these next few months.
yeah, Ryan Rucco said it on the broadcast. Jordy, this is not just the end of the season. This is just another day, another game, another opportunity to get better. Just as this summer will be an opportunity to get better for a lot of these guys. And, if you watch this season, you have nothing but faith that they will. And, Dariq Whitehead is one of those guys. And he's 30 of 67 from three this year. That's 45%. Everything else coming along, defense coming along. But, I don't know if he's going to shoot 45% forever, but he can really, really shoot. You feel like every three is going in. And, shout out to guys like Tyson Etienne, kept shooting. Drew Timme had
Yes.
16
Yep.
and 9 last night. Tosan hit a couple threes. We really could have picked anybody, for Brooklyn's finest, I think. And speaking of that, we had on the outline, we're going to talk about Day'Ron Sharpe, but I realized, he hasn't played in a week with injury. The Nets haven't ruled him out for the season yet. He may come back in these next 3 games, so I don't want to guess anything. But trivia this week, I did look up some stats for him, so I will continue with it anyway. There is a career games minimum to make an all-time leaderboard list. You have to play 400 games in the NBA. So when your points per game, rebounds per this, that, you got to play 400 games. Day'Ron's about halfway there. However, if he continues at this pace, I wanted to ask you where you think Day'Ron Sharpe would rank on the all-time offensive rebounding list in terms of per possession. So how often does Day'Ron Sharpe grab an offensive rebound relative to NBA history?
I don't know. Top 10?
Yes. Do you want to take a guess where?
7.
Number 1. Number
Oh,
1.
I should have realized. You led me to why you probably would have found this.
I know. How crazy is that? So right now, of anyone who's played 400 games in NBA history, former net Jason Williams leads everyone. He grabbed 8.4 rebounds, offensive rebounds per 100 possessions.
Yeah.
Day'Ron Sharpe, I don't know if his 4th NBA season is over yet. He might come back in these next 3 games. However, he grabs 8.7 offensive rebounds per 100 possessions. Ahead of Andre Drummond, had a Steven Adams, had a Moses Malone. I was pretty crazy when I found that out. I had to double and triple check. But yes,
That's
Day'Ron is on
awesome.
pace to become
That is
maybe
awesome.
an all-time offensive rebounding great. I don't want to jinx him, but it feels like that matches up with the eye test.
No, I agree. I agree.
And that's a perfect note to end on right there. Day'Ron may be making history. We'll see. The Nets, 3 games left. We have one more episode during the regular season, and we got a ton of great off-season content coming in the most important summer of all of our lives, as Jordi Fernández would say. Is there any parting words?
No, just let's have a great rest of the week with 3 more left. And I can't wait to talk next week and wrap it all up.
Man, it's gone quickly, but we appreciate you rocking it out with us this Brooklyn Nets season. This has been episode 24 of The Backcourt, a Brooklyn Nets podcast presented by Ticketmaster. Like, rate, subscribe, leave nice comments, all that stuff. We really appreciate it. And we'll see you next week.